Brides Podcast, where we de-imperialize, decolonize, culturally analyze, and leave evangelical cultism at the altar. My name is Chukwu.
I'm Becca.
And we are going to be discussing our next episode topic, which is titled God is the Same Yesterday, Today, and Forever Until He's Not. All right, well, Becca, what do you think brought this episode idea to the table today?
I think for both of us, we have noticed a trend in the Christian faith, the institution of Christianity, of like this sort of, for example, we've noticed that slavery for years and years, like hundreds of years, was fully supported by the Bible. Fully, like Christians were following the guidelines that the Bible gave about slavery, and were respecting it as an established practice. And then a couple hundred years ago, when specifically when African slaves in the United States were fighting back and trying to liberate themselves, and more people got behind it, a change sort of happened in Christianity that basically reversed the whole policy on slavery. And I think just like little things like that have been something that we've been really noticing. Basically, to sum it up, that was kind of long-winded, but to sum it up basically is there's parts of the Bible that can be read a certain way for years and years and years. And when society starts to change that practice or develop different scientific discoveries, things like that, the Christian faith adopts to it. As much as Christians like to tell you that they don't, that they're that God's unchanging, and that therefore the Christian faith is pretty much unchanging, well, that's really not the case. And it really has persisted as an idea in the church for a long time. Like, I mean, if you grew up Christian like the two of us, I bet both of us can name several songs in which the singer's like, God's unchanging, like literally like in the same chord progression. And yeah, but then it's like you look at history and you're like, not really.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's important, and I'm gonna probably like echo this a lot over the course of this entire podcast and probably beat the dead horse. But I always like to say, like, there's a difference between history and theology. A lot of people conflate the two, mainly because like Christians only think of the scripture in terms of theology and not history.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of God being the same, like, theologically has to be the case, because the like entire, well, a version of the religion, like depends upon it. If God, like, because the whole thing about Christianity is they're trying to argue that they're like different and like better than everybody else. So if they're not different, then they're not unique, and if they're not unique, then they're not. You see how like the domino spirals. So like like Christianity, like it hinges upon this. It hinges upon that, and so I think it's, even though like the religion itself does like evolve over time, really obviously in especially in the selections we've got today, the couple of points we have, But the problem is there's so many verses in the Bible. There's so many different topics that you really can like. It's kind of like a maze, and you just let a rat out in the maze. And the rat can really go anywhere. You don't know where the rat is. I mean, the rat's there and it has the cheese, but you don't know where it is. It's so many corners. There's so many little hidden nooks and crannies that the rat can go. You're just like chasing this rat everywhere. Like, where's the rat? And that's kind of like the Bible. You could be like, hey, you guys have been saying these terrible things for so long. The Christian's like, what are you talking about? We have verses that oppose that. And they do, but then it's like, but what about the ones that you've been listening to that don't, and then it's like you're chasing the rat. It's like, oh, where'd it go? It's here. It's there. Like that's that's basically what it's like. Um, so yeah, the idea, I think the idea, like it really started to come. It's foundational in the religion, and I really think Christianity was kind of one that did it. Judaism, the later like iterations of Judaism started to like talk about the concept of God being like super unchanging. Um, this really wasn't the case in like early Judaism, because it very clearly like God very clearly changed throughout the scriptures. His relationship with Israel changes depending on the period that Israel is in. So when Israel is in its conquering period, he's different. Whenever his standards are different. When Israel is in its save me period, is different. When they're in the exile, is different. Um, the stories change and evolve. They pick things from different places from the Assyrians, and I know the story of Job is like comes from a Babylonian story, almost verbatim. But they were in the exile at the time. So yeah, even though obviously it changes frequently, the religion as it stands right now is kind of reliant on this unchanging concept. And a lot of Christians, especially like evangelicals and fundamentalist Christians, they kind of feel like if they admit or say that God changes, they feel like, oh, well, anyone can change anything about, the Bible, but they do that already. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Because, I mean, the slavery bit is like, we're about to go, that's a good segue into the slavery question. Because that was a very major bit that they changed,
Yep.
like very recently. So,
Hmm.
yeah, let's go into that. Um, do you want to start us off with the slavery bit, or should I?
I mean, I think you should go ahead. I would I would like to turn it to
Yeah,
your
good point.
perspective as a black man. I think probably.
Good point. Good point. Good point. Yeah, that probably was a no-brainer. Okay, well, the one wearing the red, black, and green is like, do you, like person, want to start on this?
Do you, colonizer, have thoughts on slavery?
Okay, let me. Okay, yes. So, yeah. So slavery in the Bible, um, is never actually opposed in the Old or New Testaments, technically speaking. Any kind of opposition that Christians kind of manufacture against slavery in the modern time, and even back when they were opposing slavery at the time, mainly came from verses that talked about like how to treat other people. And then they would extrapolate those verses and say, okay, well, if we're supposed to treat people X, Y, and Z, you can't really treat a slave this way, so slavery must be bad. But there was never like a verse that was like, thou shalt not, or like verses that condemned slavery. The reason why slavery persisted so long was because there's a lot of verses that not only like approved slavery, but also gave like the outline for how slavery should be conducted, standards of um, selling, like how slaves are to be sold, how their value is accumulated, stuff like that. New Testament would also, Paul would lay out standards for slaves as well. Um, For instance, I believe Titus 2 9 through 10, Paul instructs Titus to teach slaves to be obedient. Now, it is understandable, yes, that the slaves of Rome were different than the chattel slavery of the United States or of the later 17th centuries and so on and so forth. But well, actually, even earlier than that. But I digress. But the point remains the same. And technically speaking, if we go to the Old Testament slavery is chattel. So it's not really that much of a difference. It doesn't matter. It actually kind of proves the point. It doesn't matter what level of slavery it was. It could have been Roman lighter slavery. It could have been, ancient Israelite chattel slavery. It doesn't really matter. Like the slavery was slavery. Um, Slaves would Timothy 6-12 says the slaves should consider their masters worthy of full respect. 1 Peter 2:18 says slaves submit to your masters, even the harsh ones. Like there was particular behaviors that Christian slaves, quote unquote, were supposed to maintain, which is again why they're talked about in the Gospels really at all, because they're trying to address Christians of all types of walks of life. So if a slave becomes a Christian, what should that slave do? The first idea isn't for the slave to get free. The first idea is for the slave to get more comfortable being a slave and to do so with Christian virtue. A lot of people don't realize that, like, in the book of Philemon, and correct me if I'm wrong because I didn't write this in the notes, I'm offering solely off of memory. So if I am wrong, please correct me. But if I remember correctly, Philemon, in the book of Philemon, Paul tells a slave to go. I think that the topic of that letter was there was a slave who escaped, came to Paul. Paul like converted him and then told him to go back to his master. Like that's I mean, if that doesn't tell you what Christianity said. Like Paul didn't think about it. Paul didn't tell the slave master to set his slave free. You would think, Paul didn't keep the slave and tell him, "Hey, um, you're a Christian now. I'm going to help this brother in Christ get out of here." No, he said, "Brother in Christ, return to the fields and serve your master." Like, do so with this, with the love of God. Like, that is the New Testament example of slavery. Old Testament.
I
Old
found
Testament is
that
even
before we segue, I did find Philemon. Yes,
correct.
he refers to the guy as his son, and the guy's name is Onesimus or Onesimus, I don't know, which literally means useful. And
Oh my God.
he is like, he became my son while I was in change. Formerly he was useless to you, but now he has become useful both to you and to me. And then he goes on to say, I'm sending him, this is the NIV, by the way. He goes, I'm sending him back to you. I would have liked to keep him with me so that he could take your place in helping me. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, and then he also goes on to say he was separated from you for a little while, that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. So he's kind of encouraging them to be like, hey, maybe don't keep this guy as a slave if I send him back. And he says, welcome him as you would welcome me, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't explicitly say... you need to
there's no condemnation on his part.
He's definitely he's definitely encouraging, I guess, the good behavior of setting this person free and trying to treat him like a human being. But
right, and
it still
that's
is just
the argument.
He's still sending him back to the people who were his masters. So it's like, how much help are you providing, Paul? So anyway,
well, actually,
really
like
funny.
stories like that. No, you're right, and like that's the main argument that's like pulled. Is like, well, they didn't explicitly say anything negative, but like you can infer from the scriptures, quote unquote, that it's bad. But the problem is there's still no explicit condemnation. Like the only expectation telling that passage is that the dude treat him better.
Yeah.
Because the problem is there's other verses that already like have standards for servants. Like there is no expectation that the servant or the slave is to go free. Like now, if the person wants to do that and be a Christianly man, then sure, that's mercy and all that stuff. That's Christian virtues. Exercise that all day long. Um, like even back in the early like colonial period, they have something called like the slaves Bible, where they have basically a collection of like all the biblical slavery verses all put together that they would give to slaves for them to read so they could like basically like study how to be good slaves under Christianity. Like I mean, it's they're very hard to find now, but there are still some out there. Um so like that's the thing, like that, and I've always heard that in like churches. They always say stuff like, "Oh yeah, well, there's nothing, let's not get it." I had one pastor explicitly was like, "Oh, let's not get into like whether the Bible actually says anything about slavery or not. Let's focus on like the virtues that's taught." And like you kind of have to do that because there's no verses against it, so you kind of just are stuck. Um, in the Old Testament, the Old Testament is like even more explicit. The Old Testament really gives you just like verses basically instructing you on how to do the slavery system. Now, the big argument that comes from this particular location is a lot of people will say, well, well, there's two arguments. One, they'll say that technically that's the old law. When technically is, I would argue not, because the old law is referring to like the moral code. This is not the moral code. This is like how the theocracy was set up.
Mm-hmm.
Like this isn't like you have to sacrifice a dove for this sin or you have to wash yourself. Like it's not a ritualistic like moralistic law that's now replaced by the cross. Like this is just like how the society was. This was government. Like this is government. Like this has nothing to do with ritualistic. Like that doesn't make any sense. The second part that's usually used in this particular section um is they'll say that it's the same as when I don't quite remember the verse. Whenever Jesus is talking to his disciples and he's like, well, they're like, should we divorce our wives? And then, Jesus is like, well, God only let you do that because your, hearts were hard, which that's a problem in and of itself. That's probably a whole another episode. That's like, yes, I allowed you to sin because, you just wouldn't listen. So, but you didn't know that the sin was a sin, but it was a sin. And I'm telling you now, 2,000 years later. But, I mean, and maybe the Bible did say it was. I don't remember seeing it in there. I have to double check. Um, Forgive my dogs in the background. Uh, but yeah, a lot of people kind of went that route, or that's the route that they'll go to discredit the particular section. But again, that doesn't work because again, these are explicit commands, and I guess you could make the argument that that's the case, but there's no proof for that. The Bible doesn't read as if that's the case, and the problem is like usually when that's the case, like the New Testament technically will refute an Old Testament thing. Kind of, what's a good example? Like Jesus does that a lot, where like he'll like talk about like the new way of doing things. Paul will talk about the new way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
They don't ever do that with slavery. Slavery is just transferred to the Christian rules. It's like, okay, we're no longer in the Old Testament rules. We're not in the New Testament rules. Don't treat them like chattel. Treat them more like, they're still your servant and slave, but treat them with, Christian dignity. That's basically the new rule.
And
Like
slaves
Exodus, for instance,
still
Exodus
need to
20.
submit.
That too, that's a huge
That's
aspect of it.
yeah, across both Old and New Testament.
Yeah, the submission of the order is very important. And this comes into like husband and wife family dynamics, which I'm sure we'll do an episode on that too, because it's everywhere. Um But like for instance, you have like Exodus 21, 20 through 21 says like you may beat your slaves as long as they do not die within a couple days of the beating. So there's like beating rules. They also have, what was the other one? Exodus 20:17 has God is providing a list of belongings which are not to be coveted, which includes servants, implying that they are property. Um, Exodus 27 through 11 says how your daughter must be treated after you sell her into slavery. Yes, children are not exempt. Um, you had a thief must pay restitution, and if unable, he was to be sold. God tells Moses and Aaron what to do. Leviticus 19, 20 through 21 says God tells Moses and Aaron what to do with a man who sleeps with another man's female slave. Just it's pretty in depth. I mean, you've got a lot. Numbers 31 talks about how after the Israelites conquer the Midianites, Moses orders the execution of everyone except the virgin girls, including the male children. And God then instructs Moses on how the 32,000 virgins are to be divided up and given to the Israelites as their property. Again, if you read this not in theology and you read this historically, it's like, what the hell is happening? And it just sounds like another Middle Eastern, um, you know, nomadic people, tribe. Like, this is what they did from the Assyrians to, well, actually, I don't know about the Assyrians. I might be off. I think the Assyrians might have been pretty stringent. I think they had an anti-slavery law, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but you know, different countries. This is stuff they all did. Um, and again, a Christian is going to read the Bible, encounter this stuff, and instead of reading it from a historical perspective, um, they're just going to try to cover it up. But I say all that to say back to the main point. This has changed now. Now it is only within really the last 50, 60 years. Now all of a sudden, slavery is bad. And Christians don't condone it. When, the Catholic Church is the one who authorized the transatlantic slave trade in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
The European nations came up, to the Pope. I can't remember the name of the Pope. But he came to I'll look it up whenever I hand off to Becca. But they asked him for permission, basically, to enslave these people, and the Pope obliged, and basically told them that they were authorized to go and civilize the savages and bring them to Christ. Um, and so the church authorized that. The Protestants in the United States, who everyone wants to trump up as the most holy of holy people, were very active in the slave trade. Some weren't. I won't say all of them were, but there were a lot who were. And again, there. I mean, you could theologically you could argue really back and forth. Like back then, if you were a Christian, there was a solid argument for slavery and not slavery. Really, I mean, you could go back and forth with it. And now God doesn't like slavery. Back then, God was okay with slavery. It was the spoils of a Christian nation, and their benefit. And we still hear remnants of the arguments today, where it's like, oh, the America came and took over the Native Americans because they were evil people, or it was good that the Aztecs were conquered because they were killing people and doing all this stuff, as if Europe wasn't doing worse. Um, so those are kind of remnants of those old arguments, but now basically the opinion of God has changed. And some would argue that, well, no, God hasn't changed, society has changed. It's like, no, I'm trying to get you to see the point that God changes with society is whatever the Christian population has deemed okay in that moment.
Exactly.
If that, like we're seeing even with like the LGBTQ movement, like it's slowly transitioning. I guarantee you, in like 50 to 60 years, there are going to be gay and lesbian people and trans people all in the church, and there's probably not going to be a single church left that opposes it because it changes, and they're already in the minority who are against it anyway. And then we'll be having another podcast talking about that. But
Yeah,
anyway, I'll segue the next topic. I've been talking too long.
it's all good. I did want to briefly mention, because we were talking about Job earlier, um, just like a random note, because I was just looking through that. He, when for context, for those who don't know, the story of Job is like, basically God destroys this guy's whole life, kills all of his kids, like destroys his property, destroys, um, like basically everything in this guy's life except for his wife for some reason, and um, but then he restores it because Job was faithful the whole time. I don't know. I've never understood it, but apparently, it wasn't even originally a Bible story. It was originally from, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chukwu. It was a Babylonian myth, right?
Yep, Babylonian. Yeah.
So yeah, but I was just looking through that because I was like, I remember they mentioned something about his servants or slaves, and yeah, when they're talking about how like all the servants were put to the sword and stuff, I just find it really interesting that they kind of group them together with the oxen and donkeys. um, I don't know. Seems like, I don't know. Just kind of seems like an interesting thing. Like they when they're talking about how all these the Chaldeans formed raiding parties and swept down upon the camels and they put the servants to the sword. It's like, I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. Not interesting, but I thought it was telling that they group servants and like oxen and stuff together. Because at
Mm,
the end of the day, this is a constructed story, as we have proof of. And so God didn't take this opportunity in his divine word to maybe make that distinction of maybe the Babylonian myth had them all
mm,
grouped together. But God
mhm,
didn't take that opportunity to distinguish slaves from oxen and camels and maybe make it seem
mhm,
like they were actually people. So, and I think that's a big thing, for me anyway, is like, this is supposed to be God's divine word. And when Christians claim that, no, he's unchanging, no, but it's like, okay, he had all these opportunities to not say, slaves, submit to your masters, even the harsh ones, 1 Peter 2:18, and it's still in there. So it seems like if this is God's divine word, he's fully endorsing masters being harsh, and slaves submitting to those masters. And yeah, so I don't know. That's my little 2 cents on slavery, because
no,
my
you're
opinion
definitely.
matters.
You're, oh, and last
Being
before we fully
facetious,
move
folks.
on, I want um, before we fully move on, I want to mention the Pope's name is Pope Nicholas V. He authorized the transatlantic slave trade through papal bulls Dum Diversas. I'm probably butchering the Latin. 1452 and Romanus Pontifex in 1455. They granted Portugal the right to seduce Saracens, pagans, and any other unbelievers to
Seduce?
perpetual slavery. But well, he's no Saracens. I don't know what a Saracen is, but that's what he says: Saracens, pagans, and any other unbelievers to perpetual slavery. And then it was reinforced by Pope Alexander VI in 1493, uh, which granted Spain similar rights for regarding the New World and its indigenous inhabitants. Pope Paul III, he did do a bill in 1537 against enslaving indigenous peoples, but he also used his authority in 1548 to declare the enslavement of non-Christians legal in certain contexts. So again, yeah, please do your own research, please, people, and look at it because it's a lot.
Yeah, and I think
So
we
yeah,
actually
that's
have an episode planned on this topic.
we
I think.
do actually. Yeah, in
Um,
depth. I think we do.
yeah, well, just because there, like the history of racism as a concept and slavery, and particularly the enslavement of African peoples and indigenous peoples, is basically is directly linked to Christianity and Christian ideas and the interpretations of the Bible that led to distinguishing and separating people based on the color of their skin. So, and that's, again, guys, these are facts. These are things we have proof for. So, like historical proof. So, anyway, are we ready to move on to our second topic? Do you have anything else to say?
No, I think we're good.
Cool. So for the second topic, I wanted to touch on abortion, because I think that is a topic that is not overlooked per se, but I think it's one that is not, like, from my perspective, having a mother who would literally picket outside of Planned Parenthood buildings. I, from what I understood, it really wasn't. It was the idea that life begins at conception didn't come from a Bible verse. It didn't come from any explicit direction in the Bible. It was simply an interpretation of a few different verses and about, like, how life is precious, things like that. But if you look at, in particular, the Old Testament, there's a lot of very explicit direction on why abortion is right, according to the Bible, and why it is something that is necessary. If, for example, a woman is in danger while giving birth. For example, I'm not sure. I don't think we put the exact verses for where this one's from, but I think this is in Exodus. There is a verse that says, when a woman has difficulty in giving birth, one may dismember the child in her womb, either with drugs or by surgery, because it is like a pursuer seeking to kill her. Once its head has emerged, it may not be touched. So with this verse, the Bible very explicitly is saying that once a baby's head has emerged from the womb, once it is being born, therefore it is now legally, I guess, a child. It is legally alive, because if it is in the womb and it is causing a woman difficulty, which later rabbis included emotional pain as well as physical pain or physical danger. They lost my train of thought. But when this woman is having difficulty giving birth, the baby is the cause of that. It is compared to a pursuer seeking to kill the woman giving birth. So, and this is, I think, also, it looks like there is a Rabbi Seitel. Please let me know if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But there is even some historical context that is said to have not given value at all to a child under the age of 1 month. And there's also no indication that a fetus had any status. So in the Jewish tradition, abortion is fully supported by the Bible. It is fully recognized as a necessary medical practice. And it is one that, again, these verses are very, very explicit. um, uh, on this is when you do not touch a child, and this is when you are able to practice abortion or perform an abortion in this area. And even now, political conservative Jews and Jewish people across the entire political spectrum, but even conservatives are of the position that abortion should be legal, because, like I said, if you're looking at the Old Testament, it's fully supported, and I think, again, this goes back to that argument or discussion of, well, when do you follow the Old Testament and when do you ignore it? And that's not very clear sometimes. At least it was not to me growing up. And it still isn't now. Because there were certain things that I had asked my parents about, and they'd be like, well, we're part of the new covenant now, and so we don't have to follow that. But then there were other things like the 10 Commandments, which were things we did try to follow. But those are from the Old Testament. Those are from the Old Covenant. So it's like, it seems very up to interpretation, personal interpretation of whether or not to follow certain parts of the Bible. And I think that's a huge, huge reason why Christianity is such a divisive religion, and also one that harbors a lot of hatred and institutionally has caused so much harm, is because if you just say, well, this is how I read this part, you can kind of get away with reading the Bible in any way that makes you right, you know? So anyway, Chukwu, I would like to hear your thoughts on this, because Chukwu did a lot of research for this episode. So.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. I talk a lot, so I was trying to give you like space to get that out. But no, that's very insightful and very accurate. Again, it kind of comes down to like my rat in the maze analogy, really. I mean, here's another rat. We're trying to chase this rat in this maze, and um, one piece of research I was been trying to look up while you were giving such a good explanation is the Southern Baptist Convention, actually, again, showing how much things change. Um, the Southern Baptist Convention ended up in 1977. They had a conference supporting the Roe v. Wade decision, actually. A lot of people do not know this. Yes, I believe the document was called what was it called? I believe it was called A Call to Concern. But it was in 1977. They eventually, yes, so it was a 1971 resolution. In St. Louis, it encouraged Southern Baptists to work for legislation allowing abortion under specific circumstances, such as rape, incest, and severe fetal deformity. The SBC later redacted this or recanted this statement, mainly because I'll get into that in a moment. Because I'll try to be as concise as possible with that. But basically, yeah, even like the early church, it was like back and forth. Again, even like you mentioned, even under Jewish teaching, they don't even agree with Christian. Like it's like you can't get your pro-life stance from the Old Testament, and then when the people who wrote the Old Testament tell you that's not what it says. I mean, Christians like live in this weird realm where it's like they revere the Jews and then they reject everything the Jews have to say about their own scriptures, because it's like, literally, well, the Jews are wrong, but the Jews are also the chosen ones, but they also wrote the Bible, but also they're wrong. And it's like, no. they're more than likely right. They're 95% of the time right. It's the Christians who have literally, it's like they've lived in allegory for so long they can't even recognize the actual document.
Literally.
Um
And that's such a
and
good way to put it. They've lived in allegory for so long. It's oh man, that's really good. Cuz it's true.
yeah,
It's been um such a like and I think a lot of the purpose of the Old Testament, I mean, we just talked about that with Job because it's we know it's a fictional story. Um a lot of purpose with stuff like Psalms or Song of Solomon. Like we know Song of Solomon isn't a true story, and that's accepted fact. That we know it's poetry. Even Christians know that. So, and I think a lot of the point of the Old Testament is not to really be taken literally, um, like as things that actually happened. Um, like, so, not I wouldn't say all the time, obviously, because there's very well documented historical things in there as well. But I think when it comes to stuff like Song of Solomon, things like that, where it's like we know it's not a true story, it's more of a like here's kind of a guideline. Here's a metaphor of life to hope you like here's some poetry. You know, this is probably really good to read in the original ancient Hebrew. You know, it's probably it sounded really cool and was a very beautifully written poem, and so and I mean obviously translating it to English, it's like doesn't have to carry that same weight, but yeah, it's like the, having all of these things and then Christians taking it so literally. So literally, everything in the Bible that is written happened for real. Like we are a young earth because God created it in 7 days and this happened all like 5,000 years ago. Like everything is taken so literally, but it's not literal and this is known even like in the Jewish community. So yeah.
yeah,
It's
and I
just
think it's important also for us to point out for like if there's like a bunch of Christians and they're watching this, we are technically talking about, I think we've mentioned before, we are specifically kind of talking about like fundamentalist Christian, evangelical Christians. Like I am
yes.
aware like that like Roman Catholics, Anglicans, Lutherans sometimes, like a lot of different denominations like are all over the place when it comes
Yes.
to this. Like some do not take it literally. I know there's a lot of Roman Catholics that are like they believe in evolution and they think that like the entirety of like the whole Genesis era stories are like just stories. So
Mhm.
like I don't want people to sit and be like, "Well, I don't think that." We know,
Yes.
we know. We're not talking
Yes.
about we're not talking about you specifically. We are talking about you specifically in other contexts, but in this particular spot,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not. Yeah, like we got it.
And yeah,
It,
if we ever use that blanket term Christians, yeah, just know we recognize that it's not every single Christian. Just as when like I don't even know what comparison I was gonna make, but you know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, if we're saying Christians, we know it's not all Christians. We say like evangelicals. Maybe there's some evangelicals that don't even think this way, but for the most part, it's the evangelical fundamentalist Christians. Like my parents, like probably a lot like Chukwu's parents. And it's yeah. We realize and recognize that there are a lot of Christians who do not think this way, and we see ya. We're not talking about you.
yeah. Um, and one kind of last thing I also want to like mention to kind of tie back to like how this relates to like God changing, because I can see people trying to say, well, this is like the church changing. This isn't like the Bible changing. The point is that the point that I would like to make is that God's morality changes depending on what He's doing.
Mm-hmm.
God does not have a specific moral code that He holds to at all times. He doesn't. If you read the Bible at like face value, he requires some absolutely wild shit on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why we think differently is because we apply, like I said in the beginning, theology to history. We are theologizing. I'm gonna just make that word a word. We are theologizing everything. So it's like, well, yes, he ordered genocide, but the genocide was spiritually justified. It's or I can't remember the exact story. There's a story in the Bible about a man who like he was like a Jewish leader of some sort. Basically told the Lord like if he won victory in battle, he'd sacrifice his daughter. And then God required him to fulfill on that promise and basically was like, don't make promises you can't keep to me. Like, but then a Christian will theologize that and be like, well, he's right. God is holy, God is just. You can't make a promise to a holy God that just can't be kept. And it's like, what are we talking about? Right? He's at like, doesn't this invalidate like all of the like trash talk to every other like deity like Molech and Asherah that we hear all throughout the Bible talking about child sacrifice? So child sacrifice is okay if God's pride has been initiated and he's like, look, you like he's God. God can't be like, hey, don't make the promises, learn this lesson, don't kill your daughter. He's like,
Yeah,
you know,
I
like
vividly remember
like
that story. Like, man.
no, yeah, exactly. He it like I think one specific thing I want to bring up with Saul. God tells, of course, my show notes crash.
It's
But God
okay.
tells Saul specifically. Oh, there it is. Hold on. Where was it? Where was it?
Um, yeah,
Oh, I
from
don't.
the notes that I'm reading, you're talking about how God regretted anointing Saul as king because he did not commit the genocide that God had commanded. And
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
There it is. Found it. So First Samuel 15. I advise everyone to go read First Samuel 15. God specifically tells Saul, which again, the idea of God regretting has again a theological explanation. Again, if you read the Bible at face value, it makes no sense. How does an omniscient, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent God do things that he knows was going to happen? Like a Christian will say, well, he does it because, like, almost as if God's invested in the storyline. Like, God knows what's gonna happen, but like he knows it will develop us, and so like he commits to it. Anyway, that makes no sense. He's omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent. What omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent being who cannot stand evil is like, hello, yes, I am going to authorize the most atrocious evil that is going to make me so angry, that is so wrong, so wicked that the world needs to be destroyed four times over. But I'm gonna commit to the storyline because I just have to for the love of the game. What? Are we serious? Saul, so God tells Saul to go and basically exterminate another people group, as they do, and Saul decides not to exterminate everything. And I love this passage because a lot of Christians will try to say, well, the Bible is an analogous. It uses like ancient exaggeration. Um, like, oh well, when God says to destroy everything, He doesn't mean destroy everything. Like, it's like kind of like a literary motive, and and there are some parts in the Bible where I will concede that that is accurate. Like, the text will show that some things are like um, hyperbole. However, in this particular section, God is very specific and gets upset because they did not massacre properly. He's like, look, y'all came back. Why are there still sheep with life in its throat? And, Samuel goes to Saul and is like, look, my boss just chewed my ass out. And it's like, why in the world did my, operational, command not go through? And so I was like, hey, we destroyed everything. We just didn't, we destroyed most mostly everything. We just kind of save the good stuff. And then God's like, no, I wanted total and absolute destruction. Why is everything not dead? And it's like, you can't read that and be like, oh, well, maybe it's hyperbole. He stripped Saul of his throne. He stripped Saul of his throne. He removed him. He gave his throne to somebody else. He was so pissed off that he did not fully destroy these people. And not only that, at the end of Samuel's chewing him out, Samuel calls the king that he was told to kill. The king came in, and Samuel the prophet himself hacked him to pieces in the throne room. Like, you can't get more literal than that. Like, what are we debating? This is insane. But again, the morality changes depending on what God's asking. So in this scenario, again, and a Christian is always going to be caught in a rock between a rock and a hard place because they have to justify this. They cannot say that God is not the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. But you can't abandon that line, right? And so a lot of them will run to the New Testament, but then Jesus claims the Old Testament. It's not like Jesus says, "Yo, that was
Disregard,
crazy."
guys.
Disregard. No, he does not. Jesus says, let me take that ancient crown and put it right here. Yes. You see this? I did that. And it's like, oh, gotcha. And then the rest of Christianity wants to be like, no, let's not that's just we're putting our modern morality on it. Okay, then what morality is it? Like the fact that we're even having this debate means that Christians know it's crazy. That's why they feel like they have to defend it. Because they read it and their internal body cringes. And I've heard arguments that's like, well, sin is just that bad. Like we just don't understand how bad sin is. It's worthy of all this punishment. I'm like, okay. And if that's the case, my argument is we shouldn't have been created in the first place.
Oh yeah.
An omnipotent, omniscient, omnipotent God, if he saw into the future and knew the shit show this was gonna become, if he created beings with the propensity, mind you, people call it free will. I call it he created beings with the propensity to do these catastrophic things. It, not only that, but if we're created in his image, doesn't that mean that he also has the ability to do evil? Have we ever thought about that? Like, if we're created in His image, and we can't do anything, like how do we have the ability to do something that He cannot?
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone ever think about that?
No.
But the problem is
That's too hard to think about.
we did it exactly, but we did it. That's the problem. We now have, according to Scripture or whatever, we now have access to the knowledge of good and evil like He does. Technically, the snake wasn't lying. He was being dead ass honest. He's like, dead ass. If you take this, you will be like God. It's just people don't understand what be like God means. People think be like God means you can create stuff out of thin air. That's not what he was talking about. The snake was honest. He said, if you take this fruit, you will know the difference between good and evil. And they took the fruit, and then God was like, why'd you take the fruit? He didn't say. He didn't say, like, that's what happened. So if we have access to that, that means God has had access to that the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
which is clearly evident through all the nightmarish crap that you can go through the Bible and just read. And it's like, what the fuck? What is happening in this book? Who is this deity? It's like one minute the deity's like, yes, I love you, my dear child. And then the next moment he's like, bring me the guillotine and bring it down on that baby's neck. And it's like, whoa,
Yo, dude.
whoa.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm done. We can segue. I'm sorry.
No,
Man.
yeah. That's so funny. No, it's true, man. It's so true. Cuz literally, you look at the Old Testament, you read through some of the stuff that's in there, like, oh man, I remember reading Judges as like a 9-year-old and being traumatized from the amount of like graphic imagery in there of just genocide upon genocide, and very explicit, like the whole, I forget her name, but the lady who drove a tent spike through someone's head, and then there's Ehud, and he's like sticking a knife so far into some fat guy that it gets swallowed up by his stomach. Like, very explicit imagery of
Mhm.
very violent acts. And but God is love, guys. God's love. And just because he endorses these acts doesn't mean that he endorses these acts. Like,
Well,
it's
they would
just
say
like,
that he was doing it against a sinful individual, technically
mm-hmm.
speaking, even though the individuals that God endorses a lot of times are 9 times out of 10, sometimes just as bad.
Oh
The
yeah,
only
if not
difference is
worse.
that they're loyal. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if not worse. The difference is just that it's obedience. Obedience determines like righteousness in the Bible. It
Mm-hmm.
really has nothing to do with like how bad you are. I mean, you have Solomon who could have hundreds of thousands of well, that's probably an exaggeration. But a crap ton of wives, concubines, he can, worship idols all day long, like Ahab. But like Ahab is beyond redeeming. Why? Because Ahab doesn't really swear fealty to God.
Mm-hmm.
Solomon still swears fealty to God. He's just straying in his obedience. That's the real problem. And that's where you get into the difference. It's obedience and loyalty. It has nothing to do with morality. Once you get that through your
Mm-hmm.
head, it's like, oh, okay, this all makes sense now. It's not about morality, it's about obedience. If you swear fealty to God, it's like a king, then it's like, oh, okay, you can stray and mess up. It's kind of like having like, a corporate person who's like works for General Motors and he's in the Epstein files. Is General Motors going to fire him? No, because he swears fealty to General Motors. I mean, he's just he goes off the deep end a little bit. But like if you have somebody who doesn't swear fealty to General Motors and then he does something else, it's like, oh well, he needs to be put in jail for the rest of his life. And it's like, are we serious right now? Yes, that's how it works because it's about loyalty and obedience. Come on now.
Yep. And speaking of Solomon and his many wives, another topic we wanted to touch on was polygamy as a concept in the Bible. This is
What a good
another
segue.
one that has changed with the times. But yeah, no, I think you're right. If I'm remembering right, Solomon had at least, it was like 200 and something wives. Crazy amount of wives. How do you even keep track? Like, did he even know all of their names is my question, because that's 200 people. Anyway, there are a lot of Bible verses that are explicitly like referring to like referring to monogamy and endorsing monogamy over polygamy, like Genesis 2:24, like the whole, a man shall hold fast to his wife and the two become one flesh and whatever, which is one that Christians like to quote a lot of the time to, again, fundamentalist evangelical Christians like to quote a lot of the time to say, see, gay people can't exist then. But that's a whole nother episode. And in Deuteronomy 17:17, there's it forbids kings from multiplying wives, because it basically is warning against like your heart turning away. And but then when you read the Bible, when you actually read the stories that are in there, you have figures like Solomon with over 200 wives, who's like God's favorite. He like gave him wisdom, the gift of wisdom, basically. And you have oh gosh, is it Jacob or Joseph who had the 4 wives? I'm forgetting.
Uh,
Jacob, because it was
Jacob,
like
I think it's really
Leah
Jacob.
and I forget all their names.
Rachel,
Yeah, and he
Leah
liked
and
Rachel
Rachel.
more. Um, but because I remember that for sure. I remember Leah was supposed to be like ugly or whatever. Like there was a picture book my parents got me that was like, and when it got to that part, it was like Leah, and it was like grotesque caricature of a woman. Rachel, very beautiful drawing. I was like, okay, all right, now I see how this is, guys. Um, but
Point taken.
no, literally. So it's like, but Jacob is another one of like a very prominent figure in the Bible, and someone that God explicitly favors, despite his sins, like him taking his birthright from his brother and stuff like that. Um, but he was loyal. He was God's ride or die, and that saved him. And when I have asked people, so in reference to polygamy, a counter argument that I would often hear, specifically from people like my parents and my mom in particular, was that it was for purposes of like repopulating the earth, if I'm remembering right. And
Yeah, it's a big one.
it's like, okay, but I thought all, no matter the how great the sin, it's all equal. And so if being polygamous is a sin, and kings like Solomon and people like Jacob were in polygamous situations and seemingly unrepentant about it, because like Jacob, there wasn't really divorce, and so Jacob didn't like divorce Leah, and Solomon didn't divorce 200 of his 250 wives or whatever. So it's like, well, a big point that I was told was you have to be repentant. You can't be living in sin but recognize that it's sin.
Yes,
Like you have to be repentant. And it's clear
right.
because they stayed in these marriages, that they were not repentant. So therefore we should expect Solomon and Jacob to be like in hell, right? But no, these are huge characters and huge favorites of God's in the Bible. So, polygamy is definitely another one that I think has changed a lot over the years. Because even though the Bible explicitly is like against it, for normal people, I guess, his favorites get exceptions. Like Jacob gets an exception, and Solomon gets an exception. Um, and just like,
Yeah,
I mean, I
I
think David, even when he
David
like
too. Yeah, no, David
killed
was in it too.
Bathsheba's husband and whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
that was his second or third wife, I think, at that point too. So, um, it's like, you can don't sin unless you are a king of Israel, and then you get a pass. You get a pass this time.
I mean, yeah, it's there's no like the severity of the punishment is not consistent. Um, and again, it reads like an ancient document of people talking about their whack ass kings. And so, because of that fact, there's a lot of gymnastics that has to be done, and then there's a lot of theological gymnastics done later by Christians who are stumbling upon these passages trying to reconcile their inconsistencies. Like, no, does the Bible condone polygamy? Technically, no. Does the Bible talk about the idea or lean more so towards the idea of a monogamous styled relationship, or do they portray monogamous styled relationships in a better light? Yes. However, the people who were major players in the Bible who were considered righteous, their sin a lot of the time equaled that of the people who God did not favor. So what's the difference? Right? And you know, some people say, well, some people were child sacrificing and so and so. And if we're really talking, according to theology, technically sin is sin. It doesn't really matter what the sin level is. Um, Idolatry is treated just as bad as child sacrifice in the Bible half the time anyway. So anyway, and if I am not mistaken, some of the gods that like Solomon followed, I do think it might have been Molech and Asherah who required child sacrifice. I might be wrong. It might have just been Baal.
I'm gonna look
I
it
don't know
up.
which one it was. Um, but yeah, definitely check me on that one. But if I'm accurate, yeah, they practice that crap. It's about loyalty at the end of the day, right? That's that repentance Becca was talking about, right? Are you repentant, right? Are you doing it, but it grieves your soul as you do it? You know, it's these like idealistic rules that have been created to justify the whack ass kings in the Bible. And they're allowed to behave this way, and they're allowed to still be considered, beacons of righteousness. Why? Because after David did what he accepted his punishment gracefully. Which, let's not even get into the fact that the punishment was the death of a kid. I don't know how in the world we haven't gotten to that point. Like, again, the mental gymnastics as well. The kid is God's child anyway, so God can do with the kid what he will. It's like, okay, your answer for everything of dubious morality cannot just be, well, God's God, and God did God things, so therefore the thing that is terrible because God did it is fine. No! That's not how things work. That's not how, no. No, because if you were reading if you were reading a Hindu document in Sanskrit, and Shiva, their god, was doing something like that, we Christians would jump on it like white on rice
Yep.
on a paper plate in a snowstorm. White on rice and a paper plate in a snowstorm. It will be on every vacation Bible school lecture talking about, look, this is how evil the other religions are compared to God, and Jesus and Yahweh is the good God, and look how evil these crazy ass gods are. That's ours. Ours is the one who took the child of a woman whose husband was killed by the guy who has her in captivity, took her kid, had the kid die, and said, David, this is your punishment. And David's fine because David cried over the body for a couple of days, was repentant, and still got the woman in the end. All he had to do was cry. And at the end of the day, he still got fucking hot Bathsheba. He didn't have to do with another kid. Are we serious right now? But we're gonna sit here. Oh my God, we're gonna sit here and we're going to listen to sermons theologizing this moment, and we're not even gonna read it with a critical eye. Read the Bible the way you would read any other document. Treat it the same. Because if you're not treating it the same, you're not being fair. Don't sit there and read the Hindu writings and the Quran and all these other documents and apply the most critical, nitpicking goggles in existence to those documents, picking them apart with razor sharp precision. And when it comes to the Bible, it's like, well, technically, same crap. Same crap, because when you do it, you're sitting there wondering, what the fuck am I reading? Who is this person? Israel can get away with murder, literally and figuratively in the Bible, because it is Israel's God. It is the same xenophobic God that changes every which way but loose, because it advances with the society. The society changes, the God changes. This is how all gods work.
Yep.
Yahweh is no effing exception.
Literally.
That's how it works. And so Christians will read these. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm ranty. Go ahead.
Oh, no. It's all good. I was going to say, and Christians like to use other societies having similar stories or similar structures of things, like creation stories, things like that, as proof that then this one's the underlying truth. This is the real one. No, it's just a
With what
reflection of.
proof?
It's
With
just
what proof? China objectively is an older goddamn society.
literally.
If we
Oh
want
my
to,
god.
Sumeria is older. Sumeria has a flood story. Why isn't the oldest societies considered the right one? The one that come thousands of years later, that's the one? Are we serious? They're all fantastical stories. They're all fantastical.
Literally.
We just randomly pick this one and say, yes, this one is the real one. How do I know? I don't. However, I believe. I believe that it... Okay. All right. Let's put it in the Bible Museum. Let's put it in the Ark. I've been to the Ark Encounter where they had like all the different... I might be remembering wrong, but I do think they had like the different flood stories talking about how like these are the different ones, but this is the real one. It's like, how do you know this? Of course ours is the right one. That's your fucking religion. The Quran, the Muslim is going to say the same damn thing. And so is the Chinese. At least the Chinese person isn't going to say it's real. The Chinese is going to tell you their story and say, yeah, it's a story, you idiot. Real? No. The dragon did not come out of the sky and speak English or speak Chinese to the ancient dude and save him with magical wood. No. That didn't happen. You think it happened? Yes. It happened. It's scientific. Shut up. We need to conclude. We need to conclude before I lose it.
Oh my god. I think all of this can be summed up in this article from the VCS.org, the Visual Commentary on Scripture. The title of this commentary is Nobody's Perfect, talking about Solomon. Nobody's perfect, eh? I don't know. Seems like you're kind of just using that as like an excuse. Oh man.
What's the difference between
Oh
Saul
darn,
and
I
David?
married 200 women. Got 200. I lost count. Oh,
exactly.
They're all worshiping these like pagan idols. Oh god. Oh darn. Oh shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no. I made a mistake there. No, that's like a systematic, like very lengthy process that he got himself into, and not 1 second did he go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be marrying 200 people, 200 women. No, he did it.
Yep.
And
yep.
It was not punished at all. So I just thought that was really poetic, this title.
No, and I'll end my portion on this too. Like, what at the end of the day is the difference between Saul and David? Like, if we're being objective, like Saul didn't do objectively worse than David did. Okay, Saul didn't genocide the people right. And I guess the Bible says he had a proud heart. Okay? Like, what objectively, sin-wise, have they done differently?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could say Saul reached out to Samuel through a divination witch person, but even then, he was still, at least he was still trying to hear what was going on up in heaven.
Yeah, his intention was to hear what God's opinion was, because he was contacting Samuel. He's like, Samuel, you got him on speed dial, man.
Exactly. And not only that, but God so gave up on Saul that he sent a spirit to torment Saul and to drive him crazy. So why does Saul get that, but the murdering lust lunatic David, who I guess because he wrote Psalms to God who was good, he's fine. He doesn't get the spiritual assassin to his office, but Saul does? And then as Saul loses his fucking mind, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, look, Saul's losing it. He's trying to kill David. Yeah, No shit, Sherlock!
I just
There's a spiritual assassin on his ear making him lose his fucking mind!
I just had a thought.
Like,
David did the original ukulele apology. He was the originator of the ukulele apology.
literally, yes,
He was
exactly.
He's like,
Oh my
hey,
god.
it's been a while since I know I just killed a guy and was coveting his wife. Like, that's dude. Someone's probably
Exactly.
already thought of that before. I I just thought of that now. And no, literally, he was like, "Hey God, here's a few songs for you," and then God is like, "Okay,
Exactly.
sick man, all's forgiven."
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yep.
Saul, who did, and like you said, arguably not as bad stuff, was tormented and
It
like
was
driven
about
insane.
loyalty and obedience. Exactly. It's about loyalty and obedience. David, no matter, even though he did some terrible things. At the end of the day, it's not that David was some righteous person who was just no. It's not about that. It's about David was loyal and obedient. If God said to do something, David did it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So Abraham, what was Abraham's test? If I tell you to sacrifice your son on the mountaintop, are you going to do it? Abraham passed the test because it was like, all right, if I tell you will be obedient regardless of what your intuition says, what you think, are you obedient? If you are not unrelentingly obedient, you do not count. That's how it works. So it doesn't matter how evil or how ludicrous, or whatever the person is. If you are obedient, at the end of the day, you will be listed in Hebrews on the Hall of Saints.
Yep.
End of story.
And it's not like you're even really given much of a choice than to be obedient to begin with, because in this scenario,
that's a whole nother conversation
oh,
too.
it's a whole nother conversation. But basically, in this scenario, God's like, hey, I created you to be in this scenario. I know what's going to happen, and I know you're going to do single thing you're going to do in life. And I still created this reality knowing that it was going to fall into sin and knowing that how much suffering there was going to be. So you have to obey me.
Yep.
I'm God. Obey me. Or else you're going to get punished for eternity. So, and then that's a whole other one of how hell has evolved over. Because again,
so many topics.
Just as
so
God has not
so many topics.
been the same today, yesterday, and forever, the concept of hell has not been the same yesterday, today, and forever.
No.
So
nope.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a really, really good one, I think. I think we got got some things off our chest today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a good conversation. It's a conversation that I think needs to be had. Obviously, we're going to elaborate on this because, like, this comes back up. I think it's a good foundational episode, for everyone listening. Like, this topic is kind of foundational. It comes up a lot, because as we talk about different topics, theological and political, Christianity oftentimes finds its way in the conversation. And you wonder, what is this religion? Because it changes so much. But it changes so much because its God changes so much. If its God didn't change, the religion wouldn't change either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you want to say the society is the one that's changing. The reason why the reason why the religion has any capacity to change is because the God changes with it. That's it. If the religion was really set in stone, which God, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipotent, could do that, it wouldn't have any room to change. But it does, because it's designed because it changed with his people because it is an ancient Israeli Hebraic religion for ancient Hebraic Israeli people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's simply that. And it has been taken and modified to fit all peoples, which has caused a lot more harm than good, I'd argue. But yeah, do you have anything else to add, Becca, to this can't even speak this
So,
episode, this massive
um,
episode?
I mean, I think we've kind of hit all the points. Yeah, the I'm a huge evidence-based person, and seeing all of the like all of these verses that say these explicit things, and then going through the history and being like, well, these haven't aligned with, you know, how Christians believe or the Christian institution of Christianity has professed itself and things like that. It's just like I don't know. I'm just like, man, it's a lot of evidence, guys. A lot of evidence. If only people did their research, but I don't know. We wouldn't be making this video if people did their research. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, any religion that claims to be unchanging, you're gonna have to give me a lot of proof. You're gonna have to show me that you have truly been the same throughout like years and years and years, which I don't think any religion has ever claimed to be like have an unchanging God, or well, I say any religion,
Mm,
many other than
the
Christianity.
Abrahamic Islam, I think, does. I think they're like the only one. Although I will say, I feel like Islam is actually a better candidate
Oh yeah,
for that,
100%.
um,
And I
because they really have not changed anything in
really,
their documents. I mean,
and I think as a linguist, a big part of that is the fact that they have not translated the Quran. Um, that it
yeah,
has
that too.
stayed in its original text, because the amount of translations and retranslations and rereadings and the time span that the entire Bible's writings takes place over is so vast, that there's no way it cannot have changed. And there's no way that, therefore, God or one's interpretation of God cannot have changed with it. So, yeah, I definitely agree. I think the Abrahamic religions for sure claim that their God isn't changing, but I think out of the big three, Christianity, and Judaism and Islam, I think Islam is definitely the better candidate, because, like, truly, they have been one track mind, um,
Mhm.
and that I think is maybe part of another big reason why Christians have so villainized Muslims. But that's, again, a whole lot of other conversations we could be having. We're definitely touching the surface on things, but yeah, um, yeah, guys, God is not unchanging according to the Bible. That should be your takeaway.
That should be on a shirt. God is not
Woof.
unchanging according to the Bible.
Getting that like tattooed.
All right. Yeah, definitely. Well, we will be back in a couple weeks with another episode for everybody. You guys can find us currently on our Instagram at Runaway Brides Podcast. It's all one word, no underscores or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also on our YouTube, where you can see the video version of this podcast if you are wanting to, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple or something like that. We will be on YouTube at or not just Runaway Brides Podcast on YouTube as well. We'll have some more socials coming out over some time, but for now, that's where you can find the majority of our content. Until then, though, I'm Chukwu, and I am butchering the ending. Oh my goodness, we'll get it, guys.
We
We'll
will
get
get it.
it.
We
I'm
promise.
Chukwu.
I'm Becca.
Yes.
And you can also email us at let me try that again, guys. runawaybridespod@gmail.com. That's kind of our general email if you've got any questions, any comments, any topic suggestions. We've kind of got a plan for the next few months, but we would love to hear any suggestions, any extra comments, thoughts from you guys. And that again is runawaybridespod@gmail.com. So please email us with thoughts and opinions. And that's it from me. I'm Becca, and that is Chukwu.
I have a great rest of your guys' day.
Bye.